Hello and welcome to Workforce Wednesday, this beautiful March day. We are here today and excited to talk about engaging with our talent with disabilities. We're happy that you joined us, and we'd love if you could let us know where you are, who you are, and where you're joining us from in the chat, as well as indicate what information you're most looking forward to gathering from today's session. My name is Jessica Miller, and I'm the Workforce Strategy Consultant for South Central and Southwest Minnesota. And for those of you who are new to this series, these monthly webinars are facilitated by our team, the Workforce Strategy Consultant, and are held the first Wednesday of the month from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. with the live question and answers from 12 to 12:30 called Unplugged. So that's an optional opportunity to engage with our guest speakers and the rest of our team. And our monthly topics are all focused on highlighting proven strategies to build talent pipelines, share best practices from around the state, and network with other Minnesota employers about all things workforce. So this particular session today is recorded and will be posted on the CareerForce MN website after the event, along with resources that are referenced today. You are able to access all of the content for previous sessions as well on that website, and I'll pop that in chat here in just a moment. Please do continue to utilize the chat feature throughout the session today to ask questions of our presenters and our guests, as well as to share best practices or resources that you have found to be helpful in recruiting and retaining talent. And finally, without further ado, I would love to pass things over to my colleague in the southeast part of the state, Jessica O'Brien.
Yes, hi, thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica O'Brien, and I am the Workforce Strategy Consultant in Southeast Minnesota. And I want to welcome everybody today to our session on recruiting and retaining people with disabilities, which is often an underemployed talent pool in Minnesota. And so we know right now, employers are focused more than ever on how to attract and retain talent to their companies. And many are seeking opportunities to deepen their engagement with our state's diverse workforce. And so to start us off, I want to ground us a little bit in this notion of nothing about us without us. This is a philosophy that originated from the disability community and highlights the idea that the voices of people with disabilities must be included in matters that impact them. So in the spirit of this idea, we're very excited to have a strong collaboration among many partners represented here on the slide that have contributed to the design, planning, and implementation of our session today. So in reviewing our agenda, we're going to hear from a mix of subject matter experts, as well as hear from a couple of businesses to learn about how they remove barriers and provide support to maximize employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. So we'll start off by hearing from Evie Wold and Maureen McAvoy from Deeds Vocational Rehabilitation Services team, also known as VRS. Who work with businesses and job seekers with disabilities to create successful employment matches and assist businesses with recruitment and retention efforts. And then we're going to hear from two business panelists about how they support people with disabilities in their workforce. We'll hear from Carrie Scanlon from Touchstone Mental Health and Andrew Robertson from Christian Brothers Cabinets. And then next, we're going to hear from Cindy Tarshish from ADA Minnesota. And we'll close with learning about a newly developed resource for businesses called Bite Size Learning. And then afterwards, we really hope that all of you stick around and join us for our 30-minute unplugged Q&A session that will be co-facilitated by our partner, David Fenley from the Minnesota Council on Disability. So with that, I'll hand things over to Evie and Maureen, who will start us off with some education.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Evie Wold, and as Jessica said, I work for Vocational Rehabilitation Services. We're a division of DEED, and I work in southern Minnesota along with Jessica, and happy to be here. So, Jessica, will you pull up our slides, or did you need me to?
Yep, I think there might be a little bit of a lag, but
Okay.
I see it up there. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you're looking at the slide definition and prevalence. I'm just going to give a little background, and Maureen will join me talking about what is disability and the prevalence, and a little bit of other background on the people we work with. So as you can see, the ADA defines a person with a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. Some examples of disabilities could be physical disabilities, maybe affecting a person's mobility or dexterity, intellectual or learning disabilities. We have a lot of our um, participants with learning disabilities, mental health disabilities, visual and hearing disabilities, and neurological disabilities. At this time, disabilities affect 25% of our population. It's just a huge number. It spans really all ages, education status, genders, and it's the only minority group that any of us can join at any time. So I like to say that it isn't has a disability, it isn't them, it's us. So that is a little bit about the definition and prevalence. On to the occupations that we work with. Where do people with disabilities go to work? Well, they go to work everywhere people without disabilities go to work. A lot of times I think people have an image of what a person with a disability looks or acts like. And I wanted to show you this slide in particular to kind of help with perspective. We work with a lot of talented people who may or may not have a disability. And you may be working with someone with a disability and you may or may not know it. We work with candidates really from GED through PhD and from entry level to advanced career. On this slide, you can see people that we work with, where they go to work, and it really covers all sectors. And even within those sectors, it's a huge spectrum of occupations. And just to go to that point of perspective, just want to tell a quick story. I was at a bakery in southeastern Minnesota, and I was asking the staff if they knew if they had worked with people with disabilities. And they told me that they had a person one time who put the twisties on the bread bags, but she left and went to a different position. And that just got me really thinking about perspective, that that's who they automatically thought of when I said that. But in my mind, I was thinking maybe about management, or we have chefs we work with, and so the whole spectrum. So I'd just encourage you to keep your mind open as far as just that spectrum of people and talent that we work with. And I'll turn it over to Maureen now to talk a little bit more about our talent pool.
Thank you, Evie, and good morning, everybody. That story is just always amazes me. I'm Maureen McAvoy, also with DEED Vocational Rehabilitation Services. And as Evie had mentioned, in the U.S., about 1 in 4 people have a diagnosable disability. And you're probably aware that people with disabilities continue to represent a very underutilized talent pool. Some good news, however, about people with disabilities in employment came out this past January by the Kessler Foundation and the University of New Hampshire. The study shows that despite a small decline in December, the job numbers for people with disabilities remained above pre-pandemic levels. And this contrasts with people without disabilities who have yet to reach pre-pandemic levels of employment. We also provide training, consultation, data, and resources to employers that might help you make decisions about recruiting, hiring, and promoting people with disabilities. So thank you for letting us share. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to introduce the panelists.
Yes, thank you so much, Evie and Maureen, for that valuable information to help frame our upcoming discussion. So I'm so excited to introduce our two business panelists who are going to share some of their strategies to recruit and retain individuals with disabilities in their workplace. So first we have Andrew Robertson, owner and general manager of Christian Brothers Cabinets based in Owatonna in southern Minnesota. Andrew purchased the company in 2014 and has been an active partner with Deeds Vocational Rehabilitation Services since 2018. And next we have Carrie Scanlon, Vice President of Human Resources with Touchstone Mental Health, based in the Seward neighborhood of Minneapolis. Carrie is an HR professional with experience in nonprofit, healthcare, and manufacturing industries, and is the recipient of the 2019 Exceptional Business Partner Award from Deed VRS. And so I want to say a special warm welcome to our panelists. And so we're going to start things off with our first question to both of our panelists. We'll start with Carrie and then we'll go to Andrew. So describe a little bit about your company and your experience with people with disabilities in your workplace. So Carrie, let's hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. I'm so excited about this morning's topic because I think it's just so important. So where I'm currently at is Touchstone Mental Health, and we provide services to adults affected by mental illness in a variety of different ways. And so in regards to supporting our staff, many of the staff who have disabilities would have what we would consider hidden disabilities. Many people who work for us have mental health issues. And so learning to navigate that is really important because a lot of them have intermittent leave, special accommodations, hospitalization, so unexpected time off. And so we're addressing those carefully. Previously, I've worked in manufacturing. I worked for a family-owned manufacturing machine shop, and we were able to work with VRS at that point and hire staff who identified as deaf. And so that was really a great experience. We worked with the job coach as well, who supported the two individuals who we had, and different types of accommodations. So we learned some basic sign language, but we also pantomimed a lot, and it worked really well in that setting. We learned a lot about working with people from the deaf community and some of their expectations around work. And prior to that experience, I spent many years consulting for small and medium-sized organizations. And so during those years, I spent a lot of time consulting with clients who are looking to support people with physical disabilities or with hidden disabilities. So I've had a lot of experience in this area, and it's really a passion of mine to help people be successful in the workplace.
And thank you, Carrie. And Andrew, let's hear from you.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, Christian Brothers Cabinets. I purchased Christian Brothers in 2014, and we are a high-end cabinetry custom manufacturing company. And so with my business partner, when we purchased, we are, make no mistake, we are a for-profit organization. We have 35 to 38 employees depending on the season. So we are for-profit. But it was definitely on our heart to have more of an impact with Christian Brothers and what we did than just profits, and what other resources and opportunities we could provide for other people. So, you know, the deal is we're not going to change the world, but we can have kind of an impact on our part of the world to a smaller degree, but it makes a big difference to that one person, right? So we kind of focused on younger kids coming out of high school, trying to figure out what they want to do, what they don't want to do as well. And it's a little bit of a different setting, right? It's manufacturing, it's custom cabinetry, it's different. And so we've worked really closely with Mike at the Vocational Rehab Service, and we've had multiple kids come through. And we try to give them the opportunities, skills, interpersonal skills with other employees, skills of working, different jobs, responsibilities. to help them kind of figure out what they do want to do with themselves, if cabinetry is something that they want to do, or carpentry or whatever. And even on the flip side, in working with Mike, and the real goal, the real thing is the student, though, right? Yeah, it'd be great if they figure out that they want to build cabinets forever. Wouldn't that be nice? But it's also important for them to figure out what they don't want to do. And if they come and work for us for 240 hours and they figure out, you know what, this construction and manufacturing thing isn't for me, that's not a failure. It's still a win. At the end of the day, the student gains valuable experience from being a Christian Brothers cabinet. So really, in any facet that we can contribute to their ultimate future success is really kind of where we focus on what the student wants and what they can get out of Christian Brothers.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really clear that both of you have had a strong commitment to supporting people with disabilities in your workplaces. And so along that same theme, can you share a little bit about some strategies or practices for recruitment and retention that you've implemented to create an inclusive and supportive work environment? Andrew, we'll start with you on that question.
Yeah, actually, it goes back to working with DEED itself. Mike Goodlander's been great. We actually set out clear expectations on kind of what we're looking for and what he's looking for. It's really a completely open and honest dialogue that really is focused around the student. And as a manufacturing facility, the only rule that we won't bend on, and Mike knows, is safety has to be the primary issue. We have heavy machinery, we have saws, we have tools. That's the one issue we can't kind of skate around. And so that's it. Otherwise, there's no real restrictions. And it starts out slow. We come in, we actually do tours. We'll sit down and we'll do an interview. We'll make offers. And we know that they're going to start slow in certain areas, that they can come in and prove that they can listen, follow instructions. And then over time, we continue to grow their responsibilities. And it's really fun to see their personalities and their comfort level grow as their responsibilities grow. So it's really fun watching that happen. One of the great things too is I have a foreman in our shop that has a heart for this and has a talent, right? And so we get a lot of one-on-one interaction with the students. And that is extraordinarily helpful. But even as a larger scale, in company meetings, our company knows that we're involved in this program, right? And they know we're going to continue to support it. And the expectation is that all the employees invest in the student and in the program, because that's what we're going to do. And we've been very fortunate. You cascade that around, and there are carpenters with 35 to 40 years of experience. And these students get to work with all different kinds of tools in all different types of areas on all different types of projects. So it's really a culture that is set up and a standard that's set up that this is what we're going to do. And we're going to invest as a company and we're going to invest as individuals. And it's really fun to see the growth of the students because of that philosophy. And that's really, and if they're happy and they're enjoying it, then there's your retention right there. And they have interpersonal relationships with the people they work side by side with, and that's been extraordinarily important.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And I know that strategy, right, of having one-on-one time with the foreman dedicated to working with the individual is no doubt a measure of a measure of success in your experiences. So Carrie, let's hear from you.
Yeah, that sounds exciting, Andrew. I'm excited to hear about your program. In regards for us, a couple things we've done is we've looked at our hiring process. And so one thing we've tried to do is create sort of a checklist or an end of interview evaluation. It's pretty brief, but the idea is that we want people evaluating whether or not individuals are qualified to do the job and have the experience doing the job, and a little bit less on like gut feel that a lot of supervisors have. And that's because we want to make sure that there's sort of a bias to hire people who are like ourselves. And so we want to make sure, kind of reminding everyone to take a big picture approach and to consider the experiences that people are bringing. So we like to have that at the end of the interview process is, like I said, a checklist of sorts that says, do they meet expectations? Can they work the shifts? And the idea with that is to get people into a little bit more consistent decision-making thought instead of just like a gut feel. The other thing we do is once a year, we do a training and we go through our recruitment process. And we also talk about implicit bias that comes up during the recruitment process. So again, we talk about why people tend to hire people who are like them, and especially similar backgrounds. So we hire a lot of people who traditionally are social workers who go to school to be social workers. And a lot of our roles, you can have experiences in the field or personal experiences helping somebody with a mental illness. And so getting people to think about that is really important. The other thing that I've done is gotten everyone to think about our elevators. A lot of our programs have elevators, and we actually work with residents who have physical needs along with mental health needs, but we don't think about that for employees. And so helping people understand that we can have people work who need a wheelchair or need a walker or who have limited mobility in our programs because they're either with an elevator or one level. And so I think just taking a look at like what's around and not like accidentally missing something that's in your environment that works, right? And as staff, we generally aren't using the elevator, but now we have 2 programs where we have a staff person with limited mobility. And before we would not have really thought of that as a place for them. So those are some of the things that we're doing on the recruiting end to welcome people into the workplace.
And then sort of along the same theme, it's really evident that both of your companies have been really committed to kind of going above and beyond in supporting different work experiences and employment opportunities and being creative. And so can you share some examples of success stories in your company? And so we'll start with Carrie.
Yeah, so I would say, as I mentioned, from a physical standpoint, reminding everyone we have elevators and that we can work with people with limited mobility was really important. I think right now we're working with VRS and we have a small internship program working with somebody who's been unemployed for an extended period of time due to a hidden disability and really working to find a way for them to be at our program 1 day a week and to get some training and get skills again in working. He's not like very familiar with email and some basic computer things. And so that was, we didn't go out and create a position because we have a position that he's training for, but looking at how we're training or when we're providing the training is something that we designed in order to work with that. I think for us as well, we've really looked at having a strong care and resiliency policy. We provide a lot of time off to staff and we want people to take it. So we really spent a lot of time talking about taking time off, taking care. Before the pandemic, we did not do any type of hybrid meeting or anything. And now we've all seen the value in that. And all of us are continuing to do that. So providing some flexibility around that. And I think it's helped. It's helped people. It's just helped overall. So I think for us, those are some of the ways we've helped people. And then another thing we've done for people with disabilities, I mentioned the training at a different time, but another is like ramped up their caseloads in a slower way. So we have programs where you need to have 30 to 35 clients and we do the ramp up in a slower way because learning is a little bit slower because of those hidden disabilities, and that's okay. And then last thing I will say is just the language you use. I think somebody else talked about this earlier, but everyone has a disability. Like, we don't distinguish between you have a mental health disability or you have a learning disability or you have a physical disability. We just reference the fact that people have medical issues and need support because of those medical issues. So trying to take the stigma out or the stereotype out of certain types of disabilities by just saying, these are, due to a medical issue, this person needs the support or this change. And I think that helps as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carrie. And Andrew, I know you had shared about some individuals in particular that have worked through programs and had work experiences, and hiring on one particular individual, and kind of that learning and learning process in supporting them to build skills over time. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. There's three examples. Sam, Cam and Sam both still, work at Christian Brothers. Sam, both of them started through the paid work experience, right? And Sam decided to stay on as a part-time employee. So he works anywhere from 10 to 15 hours a week. And again, along that continuum, the more time they spend, the more responsibility we give them, the more they enjoy it. So his 10 to 15 hours today did not look like his 10 to 15 hours 3 or 4 months ago. And it continues to grow. And he's, without question, part of our team. And then Cam was a full-time employee as well. And, he came to the program, and it was, Cam, what do you know about carpentry? He says, I'd like to smell of sawdust, right? That was where he was at. And now time later, through continuing to work, and again, those one-on-one sessions with our foreman, we got to the point where, Sam was operating a $150,000 cage clamp, putting boxes together. I mean, so there are very expensive homes up in the South Metro area with Cambria on top of them, with cabinets that Cam has put together. That's how the process had worked for him, and how he figured out how much he enjoyed it and invested it, and then Foreman and Christian Brothers reinvested back into him. And that's pretty significant. And I say not to impress that it's a $150,000 case clamp. I say that's a gigantic responsibility for how we operate as Christian Brothers and how we do business and conduct ourselves, because that's our finished product. It's a huge responsibility. So it came an extraordinarily long way to do those things. And then even when I said previously about students not enjoying our experience and how that actually is a success, we had Brad come in and he spent a lot of time with us, and even giving honest feedback to Mike at Deed about what we see in the interactions. Christian Brothers is not a right fit for him, right? We give good feedback because it's what's best for the future of the student. And now with that and working with Mike, he's actually has a job that he enjoys, because clearly he's much more of a customer service person than he was a cabinet maker, right? But now we see him in town working at a job that he enjoys, and you like to feel, okay, fine, Christian Brothers was not the right fit. But by working with Mike and giving honest, constructive feedback to Mike, so he can work with Brad, some small part you'd like to think that the experience kind of helped him point him in a different direction. And I still, again, it's not a failure that the situation at Christian Brothers didn't work out. It was a success that Brad figured out there was something else that he wanted to do with his life.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And I think, that example, right, and investing in the development and learning of these young adults. And then Carrie, you talked about the resilience policy that you have kind of adopted as a way to support self-care with your employees. I think both of these things are examples of kind of, going above and beyond, right? And probably why, your environment is a welcoming place, and so I really appreciate those examples as well. And so we have a lot of businesses listening in today who are interested in this topic. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of thinking about the value that people with disabilities have brought to your workplace, and asking you to share a little bit about that. And so, Andrew, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a couple of things. The first and foremost is actually, so there's some personal fulfillment in being part of it, and seeing the development of the students for sure. You come into Christian Brothers during football season, Cam's getting an earful for being a Packer fan, right? So they come out of their shell and they develop their personalities as people. There's just some personal fulfillment that my business partner and I get out of being part of the program, and being part of their lives. From a business standpoint, without question, there's a financial benefit. Like I said, they start out at, I said remedial, safe tasks, right? But those tasks are extraordinarily valuable. They still add to the final product of what we put into someone's home. So, like I said, we are a for-profit organization, so there's definitely a benefit to that. But even more than anything, is it adds to the core values of our culture and the people that we have. Our core values are why we hire people, they're why we fire people, they're why we promote people. The biggest ones being resourceful and approachable in teamwork, right? And all the individuals that we had have come through this program have all added to that culture. Like I'd said, we're expected as our company, we are going to invest in the program. We expect all of our full-time employees to invest in that program. If they can't do that, there's a fundamental problem with them fitting into our core values. That may not be the right people for where we are at, because the folks in the students in the program certainly are. So it helps the overall culture of what we do as well, and that's invaluable, quite frankly, to help build and maintain a culture and have the right people in the right spot working together. You can't, as a businessman, you can't really put a dollar sign on that. So there's a personal fulfillment. There definitely is a financial aspect to it, but creating and adding and maintaining a culture is really the most invaluable portion that we have found at Christian Brothers.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Andrew. And I think, that is an important aspect, right? Is that this is also an opportunity for companies to actively live out their core values and their missions and visions. So Carrie, how about you? What value have people with disabilities brought to your workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question always. I think the value for us is that as an organization with a mission to support adults with mental health issues, is that we also want to be supporting our staff with mental health issues. Sort of, it's important to walk that talk. And I think that not only the staff who are having those issues where we're supporting them, but also their coworkers, see how we're able to support them. I think it says a lot about our employee relations. From a purely business perspective, we know people with disabilities tend to have less turnover. It's harder for them to sometimes find jobs, and so they're willing to stay longer term at a position. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to support those individuals. We offer a lot of part-time positions as well, which sometimes we go through a flurry and hire a lot of students, but they graduate and they move on. But we have people who work for us part-time because that's really what they feel comfortable doing. They're not at a point in their lives where they can work full-time. And so again, they become like our long-term part-time employees, which provides us with a lot of stability in those roles and shifts and provides them an opportunity to be part of our, have a really great colleague team. So those are some of the things some of the advantages or bonuses we get by having people with disabilities as part of our teams.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's something, Carrie, that we hear a lot about is the interest in flexible part-time scheduling as well. So I wanted to ask, kind of closing out our panel time, if each of you could maybe have 30 seconds and share, kind of one key takeaway for the businesses who are listening today. So we'll start with Andrew.
One key takeaway?
Yeah, one key takeaway.
From all aspects, working with Deed and working with this program, especially laying it out and having a close relationship with Mike Goodlander, from every aspect of it has been a positive experience, and we will continue to do it at Christian Brothers as long as I own it.
Thank you, Andrew. And Carrie, how about you?
Yeah, I would say lean on your networks, right? The contacts at Deed are amazing. The contacts at VRS are amazing as well. They want everyone to succeed, so they're looking for win-win solutions. And so I say network with them. And I think, some industries are more competitive than others, but I think this is an area where reaching out and asking other leaders or HR professionals, what are you doing to support individuals? It doesn't need to be a competitive feel to it. I think just reaching out and connecting and hearing what other people are saying is really helpful.
Thank you. And thank you both to Andrew and Carrie for sharing their strategies with us today. And we really hope that the businesses listening are inspired to further engage with individuals with disabilities in their workplaces. So we're going to go ahead and shift gears now, and we are going to hear from Cindy Tarshish, who is a resource for businesses and employees, and she will share a little bit about ADA best practices and strategies for reasonable accommodations. So thank you to our panelists, and I want to welcome Cindy.
Thank you very much. I am very, very happy to be here today, just waiting for my slides to come. I have the unusual challenge today of squeezing a 90-minute presentation into 10 minutes. So if you thought I was the world's fastest talker before, you are in for a show. I'm always available for additional clarification and questions at the end of this and anytime in the future. So next slide, please. Okay, so basically what I'm going to be talking about is Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I am so excited that it looks like we have, a little under 150 people maybe on this call that are still interested in the ADA. We're coming on our 32nd year or so of the signing of the ADA, so very excited about that. When we're looking at Title I, the employment title of the ADA, the basic tenet is that no employer shall discriminate against any qualified individual with a disability in regard to any aspect of employment. So we'll get into a little more of that later, but basically it is from soup to nuts. It's from the recruitment. Are you advertising the position solely on your website? If so, you have to find out that your website is accessible to screen readers, so you're not inadvertently discriminating against people who perhaps are blind or low vision. It goes through the interviewing process, promotions, benefits, employer-sponsored events. Let's say you have a company party and you're holding it at a local restaurant and you have somebody that uses a mobility device as one of your employees. You have to make sure that the venue is accessible. Also, let's say you have an applicant who is deaf and hard of hearing and you don't know what to do. You don't have a TTY, TTD, they're a little antiquated as well. Then you use the 711 relay system. All you do is dial 711 on your phone, and lo and behold, you have your own interpreter that will interpret for the person who perhaps is deaf or hard of hearing. So next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk today about reasonable accommodations. That's kind of the bailiwick today, and it's really simple. It's just any change in the workplace or the way that you do things that provides equal opportunities for people with disabilities. I like to say that it kind of levels the playing field so everybody's on equal footing, those perhaps who identify as having a disability and those who don't. Generally speaking, but not always, the employer provides the reasonable accommodation to the qualified individual if it's requested and if it's not an undue hardship for that employer to do. And when I say qualified, I mean the individual still needs to be able to do the essential job functions with or without that reasonable accommodation. The ADA is not an entitlement program. Again, you can always go above and beyond what's required, and we'd love you to do that. But generally speaking, that person has to be qualified to do that job with or without the accommodation. Next slide. Thanks. So what is that undue hardship that I mentioned? I kind of say it's the safety net for you, the employer. There's two types of undue hardship. One is that if the accommodation is going to have a significant financial hardship to you, and you've done your due diligence and you've priced things out, and you've talked to your VRS counselor to see if there's anything that they can do to help you with the expenses in any way. But at the end of the day, you know, you're a small company and a $10,000 piece of equipment, which generally is not the case. Most accommodations actually are $500 or less, and the majority of them are actually free, like a change in your policy or procedure, something of that nature. So one of the undue hardships is the financial undue hardship, but the other undue hardship is the administrative hardship. If the accommodation changes and alters the nature of the way that you do that, offer that job or do your business, let's say somebody needs you to change the hours of operation because they're on a medication that they can't wake up early in the morning, that would be an example of an administrative undue hardship. Of course, you're not going to have to change, you know, the way you run your business or the way that the hours of operation. So next slide, please. Okay, so the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, I know that you guys know that very well, but the one piece that I think is so important is that they said that an individual with a disability can disclose they have a disability and or ask for reasonable accommodation at any time. It can be during the interview process. Let's say they have a non-apparent or hidden or invisible disability. You know, and if they don't need the accommodation, you know, for the interview process, they don't need to disclose it at that time. Some people, you know, have intermittent issues with their disability, like individuals with multiple sclerosis. They might not need to ask for an accommodation until 3 years into the job, maybe when they have an exacerbation. Or somebody might disclose, you know, in the first week of the job, you know, hey, I didn't realize, but I'm going to need a large screen or a piece of adaptive equipment. But the EEOC says that the person can disclose and ask for an accommodation at any time during their employment. So next slide. Principles of reasonable accommodation. It has to be an interactive process between you and the prospective employee or the employee. You know, you have to have a conversation. There has to be a give and take. There can't be just, no, we don't do those accommodations or we can't provide that accommodation. You know, it has to be interactive. There has to be a conversation. It also has to be an effective accommodation. I use the example, you know, let's say somebody is deaf that you have as an employee and they ask for an ASL interpreter for staff meetings once a month. And you say, no, why don't you sit next to Cindy and she'll just write notes back and forth. You know, that's not an effective accommodation because, you know, ASL is not English. It's a very different language. The reasonable accommodation only applies to the accommodation that reduce the barriers to employment as they relate to the individual's disability. You know, it has to be disability related. It can't just be, you know, I want to take some time off because I need to go to Disneyland during the winter. You know, that really doesn't have much to do with the individual's disability. And the accommodation doesn't have to be the best accommodation as long as it's effective. You know, you don't have to do the software package with all the bells and whistles if the smaller package that costs less will provide the access that the employee is looking for. Next slide, please. Again, it's an interactive process. Nowhere does it say that it has to be in writing, the request for accommodation. I think it's best personally and professionally if you do have the process in writing, if you have a form that the employee can fill out that requesting the accommodation and what they need to provide to you, so that you have that paper trail. So maybe the next supervisor down the line has that information, but it doesn't have to be in writing. It can just be basically, hey, you know what? I have some stuff going on. I have a health issue and I'm having a hard time with this job function. I'm wondering if we could find something that would help me. That's a request for accommodation. So they don't have to say any magic words, under Title I of the ADA, I request this accommodation. And the interesting thing is that the request can come from somebody other than the employee. It could be a job coach, a VRS counselor. It could be a rehab, somebody who is maybe in rehab. It could be the parent of an adult child with a disability that could request the accommodation. And there's nothing that says that you can't go above and beyond what's required under the ADA. What I heard from Carrie and Andrew today, their panelists, they are going above and beyond, and that's great. I applaud them. So again, there's no law that says you can't go above and beyond what's required by the ADA. The ADA just states kind of the baseline. Next slide, please. So if the request is reasonable, you would provide it. But if you were going to say it's unreasonable, you have to share what is the evidence, what's the undue hardship that it's unreasonable for you to provide the accommodation, right? You have to look at it case by case, individual by individual. You can't generalize and say, you know what, we had somebody with epilepsy working here and, we just can't hire anybody with epilepsy anymore. And that may be so if you're in construction and the job is that the person's a roofer. I had that example, but maybe the person is in your marketing or your accounting department or the receptionist that has epilepsy. You'd have to look at it like that, case by case. You can't say, if we do it for one person, then we have to provide this accommodation for everybody. That is not a defense under the ADA unless everybody has the same disability and is asking for the same accommodation, which we know would be ridiculous. So, if somebody asks for an accommodation, you can't dismiss it or deny it based on the fact that you think that you're going to have to provide it for the rest of your employees, which you do not. Again, avoid saying no unless you can substantiate why it's unreasonable, why it's an undue hardship for you. And then you have that conversation because, again, it's an interactive process. Next slide, please. So if it's reasonable, provide it, monitor it. You can go back periodically and see if it's working for you, for the individual. It's a fluid thing, again, interactive process. What you don't want to do is go back every week and say, hey, do you still need this accommodation? Because in order for that person to be a qualified person with a disability, their disability is long-term. It's not a broken arm or back surgery that would be, that the person would be fine after the normal course of treatment and recovery. So it's fine to follow up and check on it, but not excessively, I would say, as a tip. Next slide, please. I have a couple more minutes, I'm hoping. So here are some examples of accommodation, modification to the workplace, larger doorways if somebody uses a mobility device, quiet areas, air purification, lighting, things of that nature. Job restructuring, part-time work or modified work schedule might be good. Reassignment of non-essential functions, and telecommute, which we found out during this pandemic, telecommute is something that really is working well for everybody. Leave, it has to be related to the individual's disability. For example, maybe they need to go for 2 weeks, they're getting a new service animal, and it's 2-week training at Guide Dogs Institute in Morristown, New Jersey. So that would be leave that is disability related. And then providing qualified readers or interpreters is also would be considered an accommodation for an individual with disability. Next slide. Okay, I had mentioned kind of this is kind of a Hail Mary, I like to say, of accommodations. It's reassignment to a vacant position. Let's say somebody is an employee and unfortunately they get in an accident and they're not able to do the essential functions of that job with any accommodation. Do you terminate them or is there something else you can do? Here's what you can do. Reassignment to vacant position. The person has to be qualified to do that job. You'd look and see what positions you have open. You don't have to kick somebody else out of the job or create the job, but your first obligation is to find something that's similar in rank and pay, but it may be something that has different hours or lower pay. But if you can reassign that individual to a different position, that's a very valid accommodation. So keep that in mind. Next slide. Getting there. Acquiring or modifying equipment, maybe I had mentioned, a larger screen or a specialized software. Let's say somebody does need screen reader, you'd provide that software for them. Changing test and training materials, making it accessible to that individual, maybe providing an alternative format or providing additional time. Maybe somebody has a learning disability or ADHD or something like that. And then modifications of policies and procedures, my very favorite accommodation. It costs you nothing. And you just, if you say, well, I can't provide that accommodation because that's our policy, then the individual would say, and I coach individuals to say, well, can we look at a modification of that policy or procedure in which to provide that accommodation for that individual? Next slide. Things that you don't have to do. So this is, again, one of my favorite slides. You don't have to remove an essential function or hire somebody else to perform that function, right? The individual can't ask to remove that function as an accommodation request. You don't have to lower the production standards unless everybody is working at lower than production standards, but you can't hold the individual with a disability to a higher standard. But again, you don't have to lower those standards as the accommodation. You don't have to assign anybody to a different supervisor, but the individual could request that the supervisor treats them in a different manner. They supervise them in a different manner. Maybe the individual's a supervisor that yells a bit. The accommodation might be that they lower their voice, somebody else is in the room, or maybe they supervise them via email. You don't have to promote the individual to a hired position or provide light duty, which is more of a workers' comp kind of accommodation. You never have to excuse a misconduct, even if it's caused by the disability. And you don't have to provide personal use items, eyeglasses, wheelchairs, prosthetic limbs, or more currently for us boomers, hearing aids. Next slide. Resources, always good. Your EEOC, I want to put a quick plug in for Job Accommodation Network. They are excellent. You can call them or you can go to their website at askjan.org and they can help you and your employee with a multitude of accommodations. Definitely just check out their website just to see what they offer. And also Minnesota Department of Human Rights, which kind of oversees, as well as EEOC, if somebody were to make a complaint, they protect Title I of the ADA. Next slide. This is it. If you have additional questions, please contact me at ADA Minnesota. I am a program within the Metropolitan Center for Independent Living, and I'm also affiliated with the Great Lakes ADA Center, and I provided you with their contact information as well. And I'm going to hang out for the unplugged portion if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Cindy, for all of that wonderful information. And want to remind everybody too that the contact information for everybody, all of our presenters, is in this slide deck, which will be posted in our CareerForce website. So we're going to quick transition back to Evie with VRS, and she's going to share a tiny little, she's got a couple minutes, maybe seconds, to share a little bit about a new resource that was developed in partnership with Mayo Clinic called Bite-Sized Learning. So Evie, we have about 1 minute, so we'll let you maybe share some brief highlights.
I will pull up my inner Cindy and try to speak quickly on this. We're super excited about these modules with Bite-Sized Learning for Disability Inclusion. They're each about 15 to 20 minutes. There's 5 modules we have. They're all about disability information. And really they were meant to be delivered at either like a team meeting or a huddle, maybe over the course of a few months. You could introduce one at each team meeting. The modules are all recorded, so you can go to the link here, and I think it's also on the resources page, and you can play it for your staff or your team meeting. Then with each module, there's a takeaway card to kind of have that dialogue back and forth. If you don't feel comfortable, or if you'd like more live learning, myself or any of the BRS staff can get you connected with trainers that can come virtually or in person and deliver these trainings over the course of time. The 5 modules we have, I'll just quickly go over. We have the definition of disability in the ADA, recognizing and implementing reasonable accommodations, self-identification and building a more inclusive culture, inclusive communication, and mental health matters. And in the spirit of what Jessica talked about earlier, nothing about us without us, we really tried to get subject matter experts that have disabilities in developing the content for these modules. And so if you're interested at all, please get in contact with me or let us know, or you can access them yourselves. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Evie. And we really want to thank everyone for sharing their time and expertise and experiences with us today and making this such an informative session. In closing us out, we have some resources available here. And then we also invite folks who are listening to put other resources in the chat. I will hand things over to my colleague, Jessica Miller, with any final announcements. And then we really hope that everybody sticks around for our Unplugged session that directly follows this event. So Jess, back to you.
Thank you. Well, we are very happy that you joined us today. We know how valuable your time is, and thank you for choosing to spend that with us. I did pop a lot of resources in the chat for you, so you should have access to everything that was on that PowerPoint through the chat. But we will also make all of that information available on the CareerForce website as well. Just if you Google CareerForce Workforce Wednesdays, you can pull up all the information from today, as well as resources and recordings of previous presentations. I also want to just kind of direct your attention to an evaluation that we put in the chat, as well as a call out for next month's session, which will be on April 6th at 11 o'clock, focusing on connecting with our second chance workforce. We would love to have you join us for that. So this concludes our first portion of the Workforce Wednesday. Thank you again for joining us. We'll take about 1 minute to transition to the Unplugged question and answer portion of today's time, which is not recorded. Everybody will be able to unmute and turn their cameras on and be able to ask questions specifically in regarding their scenarios and situations. So thank you again for joining us today.